We're going to pivot around to effective client reporting, how to present negative and positive results. All right. We're going to present our presenter today. Mindy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I am excited to talk about this topic, even the bad news part.
It's incredibly important.
Right.
Incredibly important. For our audience, let me introduce you. Mindy Weinstein, a PhD, is a McGraw-Hill author and a globally recognized figure in the field of digital marketing. She's a founder of the marketing firm MindShift. I love that name. And has worked with and trained professionals from organizations of all sizes, including Facebook, World Fuel Services, and Arizona State University. She is a marketing instructor at the University of Denver and also has served as a program leader at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia Business School. So she's going to teach us a few things or two about client reporting. Mindy, I'm going to be listening in avid attention here because this is something that we always focus on over our shop. So take it away, please.
Right. Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So let me share my screen with you and we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this is going to go today and just got to bear with me. So as you already heard from my intro, I have a very strong background in education and I have a PhD. It's in general psychology. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about before I take you to the actionable part of reporting is really the why behind, like, why are we reporting certain things? Like, why do we need to put visuals? Does it really matter? And so I need to talk a little bit about how that works, again, from the psychological standpoint. And then I'll get into the nitty gritty. How do we report bad news and good news? Because I will tell you, I have been in digital marketing for a really long time. And it's so fun when you get to report amazing news to clients. They're like, hey, look what I've done. And I even appreciate the conversation before I joined, even listening to Ben, is that, sometimes things are hard and we can't control things. And so we need to know, how do we report to clients so that they continue with us and that they trust us. And so that's really what I'm going to be focusing on. So I got a little click happy there. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I want to focus a bit on the data storytelling side of things, because that is really what we're going to get into when we talk about reporting. Because as human beings, we like visuals. And I know there's conversations about being a visual learner or being more hands-on. Well, for what we're talking about in terms of reporting, you need to have the graphs so that someone could easily look at and see what's going on. But you have to have the narrative and, of course, the data. And so what I see happen a lot, and I've been guilty of this too, is that we're in it, when it comes to SEO. And if you're doing paid search as well, you're in that data, you know what it means. You can explain it very easily, but a lot of times we tend to just report the data and it goes to someone who doesn't quite understand and can't read between the lines of what does that data really mean to me and my business. And so that's where the other parts of data storytelling come in. So it's not just about presenting numbers. It's about weaving in that narrative that resonates on a human level. And right now, this probably seems a little like, okay, like this is a little out there. Like, what does this even mean? Here's what it means. What do our clients care about? That's what it starts. What do they care about? We can report numbers to them all day long, but I will tell you from experience that I have had clients, and some of you might feel the same way, where I was really excited because, oh my goodness, look, their organic traffic has gone up, 50% since the month before or the month before that. And I'm excited and I'm reporting on that. But what I get back sometimes is, oh, that's great, but what does that mean to our bottom line? So we have to know what our clients care about, which really is key performance indicators. What do they care about? Do they care about traffic? I have some clients that absolutely care about the number of sessions organically. But I have other clients that they don't care at all about that. They just want to know how many people purchase products, meaning they just want to know the revenue that came from organic. So it's really important to have that conversation with clients right out the gate. And again, I'm telling you things that I've learned over the years. So I haven't always done this. It's just I try to always now remember is that you start on a new project, you talk to that client and you say, what are your goals? Tell me specifically, what are you trying to get out of SEO or paid search? What are your then, in terms of the goals, what would be a measurement for that goal? And that's where those KPIs come in. And otherwise, we're just reporting numbers. So to resonate on that human level, find what's important to your client. And you're going to have different people probably from the organization. So people are going to care about different things. So you need to know that. Maybe the digital marketing manager cares more about the traffic numbers, but then the CMO cares more about the ROI. So you need to know that again in advance. So here's where I'm going to geek out with you for a second. I can't help myself. I have to throw in some psychological theory, but this one is called dual coding theory. And again, what we're talking about with numbers and pictures, I mean, it's been proven with research. We know, and this theory's been around for decades, but we know based on this psychological theory that our clients will have better memory and recall when we are presenting to them. This is both visually and verbally. So of course you're going to go over things, but even textually. So giving them that, hey, look, here's this bar graph of our traffic. Here's the line graph of where we've been. They're going to remember that. That's what sticks in their head. Also with our reporting, when we're able to weave in the stories, like I talked about, which stories are just visuals in the narrative, then it's going to help our clients understand things better. So some of this you might be like, well, yeah, of course. And I do that too, like, of course. But then when I get into the reporting, I'm like, ooh, look at this number and that number. So it's a reminder that we need to make it as easy as possible for our clients to understand what we're reporting to them. Because that's also the increased buy-in, which is actually based on this theory too. If we can show key stakeholders, so that could be the person who hired us, from your client, that could be the CMO, that could be the CEO, could be the board of directors. You need to show how what you're doing with SEO, which you can do this with your narrative and your visuals, show them the importance of what you're doing and how it's making a difference. And then that's going to lead to better decisions. And so maybe the decision is you're showing them, here's where we're at. The decision might be, we need to build out more content. We need to get into video marketing. I mean, there's so many things that you could do, but you need to really focus on how at a human level can I really resonate with them. And so again, okay, I feel like when I talk about psychology, again, I get like, it's a little bit out here. So we're going to bring it back to make it more actionable. So what does this mean even in reporting? Okay, there's really three things. Number one, when you are creating a report, you always need to include a narrative. And I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. But basically, if you're doing a report or even a presentation, a PowerPoint, start with key points. So highlight your key points. Make them bulleted lists. People like bulleted lists. They don't want to read a dissertation. I'll tell you, I don't even want to read my dissertation that I had to do for my program. So just highlight key points that are tied to what the goals were and show your progress. That's going to really help when someone's looking at your report to understand what's happening before they dig in. And also, I will tell you from experience that when you're doing reports, and you might already know this, it gets passed around a lot internally. So you don't know who all is going to see it, and you don't know if they're going to go through each page of the report to get into the details. So have that narrative ahead of time so they can pass it on. Some of my clients, what they'll do is they'll actually just copy the narrative from the report and send that to the higher ups to just show them what's happening. So think about that narrative. Then think about your visuals. So don't go crazy with visuals because you're thinking, well, I want to make sure I'm resonating with people. They need to be strategic in that they focus specifically on what were the goals that you're reporting on, what matters to your client, and then let's take that complex data and make it into a nice visual. And again, visuals, they're charts. That's all we're talking about here. You don't have to do anything too fancy. And then focus on the impact. So this would actually go into your narrative as well, is instead of just reporting on the data, talk about what that means. So you could report it in terms of your KPIs. So that's just what you're going to use to measure success. But you could also bring in your targets, which a target in what I'm talking about is basically just saying if you were trying to grow revenue from organic search traffic by 20% in quarter one, that's your target. Your KPI is basically your revenue from organic traffic. So just kind of understanding that and reporting accordingly. Now let's get into the good news, bad news, because I feel like have all been there. And if you haven't been on the bad news part, you might eventually. And again, that is no fun. So I'm going to, in just a few minutes, show you reports that have both. Good news, oh my gosh, those are so much fun because you can focus on in your narrative, like what you've done in your SEO strategy and your plan, like look at what happened from it. Like what was the impact? Again, showing that measurement of success and where we're achieving those results. Those are great. Now, I'm going to continue with this one before we get on the bad news. You need to do a little bit more too, even on the good news, even though it's all great, always quantify. And you can do, percentages. So I actually had it up here on my bookmark bar, but I took it off. I actually have bookmarked a percentage change calculator because I have a hard time doing that easily. So there's a little calculator I use, but I like to quantify success. I will report the number of, if it's organic traffic and not so the KPI, I'll show what that was the month prior, what we're doing now. And a lot of times I'll show year over year, but I'll quantify it. I'll talk about the percentage change, and it's great to show. And I'll show you this in just a little bit, I will show not just a comparison to the last period, which might have been just the previous month or previous 30 days. I'll show a bigger picture. How have we done year over year? And if you've been with that client a long time, you might even have a bar graph that shows each year you've been working with them, how did you do in January? How did you do in February? And so the quantify it is where I'm getting. So good news, that's fun, right? But has anyone ever had to report bad news? Yeah, that's a little bit more difficult. And we know there's a lot of things that are out of our control. We can't control when Google makes all their algorithm changes. We can't control our competitors if all of a sudden they've just really kicked up their search marketing. We can't control that. We can only control our own website, but we know that. And so it's difficult sometimes to communicate to a client that, yes, we might have had a drop in rankings or traffic, but this is why. And so you need to provide context. So help your client understand the situation. Why did this happen? And if you don't know why it happened, because I'll be honest, sometimes I don't know. I don't have an answer right away. I've got to dig in even more. I'll let clients know that. We've seen a drop. We think it's because of this, and I'll even put it in the reporting. But we're going to spend the next few weeks digging in and doing more research and coming up with a solution. And that's where the honesty with optimism. Be optimistic, but be transparent. So they're going to know if there was a drop in rankings. Well, maybe rankings not so much unless, they are digging a little bit more on the keyword side, but they'll notice a difference in traffic. And of course, if they're getting online revenue, they'll notice that change. So be transparent about what's happening. Be transparent about the challenges. But you don't want to just report challenges. You need to report what are you planning to do. And so how are you going to address those issues? That is really important. And that leads to action steps. So whether you're reporting good news or bad news, you need to always get into the what's next. What are we planning to do? And so that's something that comes up a lot. And again, just from my experience, even if it's good news, you're still going to get the question of, well, how do we sustain this? Or does this mean that we're just going to be at a plateau? We did better, but we're not going to go up even more. And so you need to have those action steps. What do you plan to do to improve? So let's get into reporting. So now, again, there's a little psychology, just understanding the concepts, but it's really important to understand how does this mean, or what does this mean to you in a more tactical standpoint? So let me go ahead and get you in to my next tab, and I'm going to share this tab instead. So there we go. Now, for transparency on my side, I am using Google Merchandise Store. So I mean, I can't show client data. So I'm working here with the demo account. So just bear with me, but it's all the same things that I would do in a report. So what I'm going to start with is the bad news. So we're going to just say this is a bad news report because actually it is. And so this is based on real data from GA4 for, the Google Merchandise Store. So what I would do and how I got here was just going straight to the reporting within SE ranking. And this is just the way I do things, is for my monthly reports, because mainly what we do in my organization is SEO, I start with the SEO report template. And so you'll see that within SE ranking is that there is a SEO report template. From there, what I do, though, depending on the client, is I will go ahead and I will just modify what I include just based on what you see here on the left side. And so there's some things that I might take out because I know that the client be overwhelming to them, or there's things I might put in just based on knowing the client. And so that is really easy to do right here in all of these. So clicking on Google Analytics, I mean, you have different options. Google Search Console. Now this client, well, it's Google Merchandise Store, but I didn't do Google Ads because, again, we mainly do SEO, but you could put all of these things in. But again, I'm going to focus on what I would report on. So it's really, again, easy to do. What you're going to see in this report here, it's a title page. You're going to see some text I added. You'll see an overview, traffic. You'll see some performance metrics. Let's get right in. So I have this branded. I personally always include a table of contents. I just feel like people like to see that. It's easier for them to just go to the page they want because, again, we don't know if someone's going to be sending this to someone else within the organization. But here's where we get a little more tactical. So I kept talking about a narrative. This is my narrative, and this is how I like to set it up. I like to have my key findings or my highlights. What is the impact on the organization, and what should they do next? Action steps. So if you think about it this way, it's the what, that's the key findings, the why, which is the impact, and the what now, which are the action items. So I will tell you, when I was looking at the Google Merchandise Store, it was a good example for bad news because they did have a decrease in organic sessions and even website clicks. So for a lot of my clients, they do like to measure how many clicks are on their website from Google search. So we use that very often as a KPI. But here I just report, okay, this is the news, 9% decrease, 11% decrease. That's not great. And then there's more bad news because there's been a decline throughout the last 12 months. I'm not going to hide that from the client. And I start to give a little bit of findings. We know that there's been algorithm changes, and we know it's a highly competitive market that could have impacted many in the industry. But what I do, and this is, again, just how I go about working with clients, is I do prioritize their keywords. So we prioritize them in priority 1, 2, and 3. And we do clusters. We do other things too. But what we've found is that it's a lot easier with reporting and just not getting too far into the weeds with clients is that, okay, for the next few months, we are focusing on these 10 keywords. If we rank for these 10 keywords, that would be amazing. So I do report on that too, and I'll show you what that looks like. But then I get into the impact. Again, what does this mean for the organization? Well, a decline in traffic is, again, transparency. It's going to hurt our ROI, and it's going to hurt how many people are coming to the site, and of course, engagement. But this is where you got to really think about the bad news. I mean, if a client only got the key findings, that's depressing, and then they're going to start questioning you. What makes a difference, in my opinion, between an average, really, search marketer to an excellent search marketer, of course, it is that knowledge and the results, but it's also how do they communicate? How do they communicate? So letting clients know, like, hey, listen, I've got this. Like, I understand there's bad news, but this is what we're going to do. And that's going to build trust with them. And here's my action items. We're addressing these issues head on, and we're going to do an audit of our SEO strategy. We're looking at the content, and we're going to compare that to the search algorithm updates and see what we can't do to change. We're going to build out a content marketing plan if they hadn't had one, and just the last being positive. So it's just showing what do you do now. But let's look into the report and what my monthly reports actually look like. So I put my narrative into a summary, but you can put one into each section. So here I have an overview of all traffic because most of my clients like to see just overall, like how much traffic's going to their site. But because I'm mainly doing SEO, I focus on organic traffic. And so what I like to do with the reports is I make sure that I'm including, so you can see this is organic traffic sessions, which does align with what we have in here. And so I will put that in there with information so that they can see, here's the breakdown of where people are coming from, and here's my number. Now this I added. So I mentioned that a lot of my clients like to see year over year. So I'm also a big spreadsheet person. I know that Ben mentioned that too. And I know there's so many fancy tools, but I like spreadsheets. And so I just have a running spreadsheet and I'll pull the data from SE ranking and I just store it in there for each month. And I just have this continuous bar graph. And so all I did was screenshot my bar graph. And then I went over here to formatting and I added it as an image. And then I added a little title to it so that clients can easily see what's happening. Then I always include Google search performance. And so with that, I like to just show the data. But again, this is where the visual comes in. Anyone can glance at this and get a feel for what's happening. And it is comparing some information too. And same thing with impressions. And so I don't use impressions as a KPI, but I do like to just include them just to show clients. And this is where I said I get into the priority keywords. So just us personally as an agency or me as a professional, there's a lot of keywords that you could report on. I just found that a lot of my clients get overwhelmed. And so I try to just focus on reporting the priority. So what I did within SE ranking is I just created basically a category, and my category is priority. And then I just went ahead and just put the ones that fall within that category into priority. And that's what I configured to report. I do include an audit snapshot most of the time for clients. And so this is also easy to add just by going to these sections and then going to the audit. I don't include, and this is again just me, doesn't mean that you shouldn't. I don't include all the issues because again, I find that my clients get too far into the weeds. So we focus just on the score. That's what we look at, is what is the score. So what does this look like once I save and export it? Well, then it turns into a really nice report that I can just send to clients. I got my branding in there. It's easy for them to look at. If they want to just copy this section and send it to someone in the organization, they can do that, but they have everything they need. So this is my bad news, but I'm going to use another example and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'm mindful of that too, but I want to show you a good news example. So in addition to doing monthly reports, we also, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you, I just realized, there you go. This was my PDF that I was looking at. So this is what it would look like when it was exported. So this is the monthly. And again, just super easy to send out with the summary. Now, let me show you what I would do if I was to send a quarterly report. And let me get to that here. Okay. So now I'm in my quarterly. So what I have been doing over the years for clients is we do monthly reports, but we'll also do quarterly reports because that gives the bigger picture of what's happening, I feel like. And it also allows us to pivot if we need to. The quarterly report is often the one that will present to really the C-level if they want to have that, or the director level. And so with the quarterly report, focus more on visuals than anything else. And what's really great with SE ranking is that when you set it up, so this I just did actually from scratch, and I'll show you the sections, but when you're setting it up, I set it up with the landscape orientation. So that way when I export it, it looks like a slide presentation. So for here, let me show you. I keep this one a lot cleaner and a lot simpler, just again, because it's at that higher level. Most of the people who are watching or listening to my quarterly report presentation don't want to get too far into all the details. So you'll notice though that this is a good news report, but I still broke it up into the same sections in my narrative: key findings, impact, and action steps. So this still falls along with all the data storytelling that I was talking about ahead of time, where now I have my narrative, but I'm talking to a different audience. And so this was actually something that I changed a little bit of the numbers because I was trying to protect the client, but this is actually from one of our clients. They care first in terms of their KPIs about the number of deals. That's what they refer to them as. And then they also care about the value of closed orders. So they like to know the deals. So that's what's in the pipeline, or part of that is what's open, what's closed. They want to know the total value. And the other thing, and you might have clients like this too, they want to know what their ROI is on your cost. And so this is one of those clients. So they're like, well, we've been spending money with you on SEO. How are we doing? And so I report those numbers. And then again, you see my priority keywords. So you see the what. So those are my key findings. These are the things they care about. But what's the impact? And so, of course, I had to point out that there was a high ROI on SEO spend. But then some other things. What does this mean? It's better for the pipeline. We're building credibility and authority. But I can't just leave it there because the question comes up, well, what now? And so that's where those action steps come in. So we always include that. So I do want to run through this with you a bit. So with this particular report, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's all done, I kept it really simple because these are going to end up being slides. And so bring in terms of formatting, I brought in my actually text is what I did for this one so I can make it really big. Then I brought in just the overview, again, trying to keep it simple. I don't want too much on here because, again, it's a slide presentation and I'm going to be talking to it. Then it's really easy. You just put in your page break. So this one I did, again, from scratch. And then I got into organic traffic. So again, focusing more on the visuals than anything else. But remember, this is a quarterly report. So I'm going to have the full quarter. Now for search performance, as much as I like to give a lot of details, I know my audience isn't going to care about that for this particular report. So I just focus on what are the clicks, the impressions, click-through rate. But for this one, I do show, instead of listing all of the priority keywords, I just give a nice little bar graph instead, pie chart. So just again, keep it simple. I can talk to it, but they can see it instead. So this is where I feel like I got a little bit of creative, and I just actually got this visual, this graphic from one of the stock photo sites. I found that when I'm talking to the executive level, sometimes it's confusing, like when we're talking about all the SEO things like technical work, content, link attraction. I call it link attraction, so link building, or on-page optimization. And so I ended up going on a stock photo site. I found these little gears. I don't know what you call that, like this speedometer thing. But I thought this would be a really easy way to show when I'm talking of how we're doing in each category. So for this one at the time, on-page optimization, we'd done that. Like we had gone through the site, every page was optimized. That was a green. Link attraction, we were still working on it, and we were having it was just a slower going. So I wanted to be honest about that. So I put that as yellow. Content, I put as a red because I was really trying to show the challenges we were having in terms of trying to get them as the client to okay content being added to their site. And then technical work, we had a green because we had done that. So I had areas of challenges to show the client, and then I listed them here, but they could easily see it in a visual. But as I mentioned to you, you want to go beyond just what are the problems into what is the next steps. And so this is where they're talking points, but I could get into we see the issues we're having. They saw the visual, but you know what? We're going to be working on a competitor analysis. We're working on a keyword strategy. We have a plan to go after new priority keywords. We're working on a PR initiative to get more backlinks, and we're going to do it with podcasts and then getting into the content plan too. But let me show you then what this looks like if I was presenting this again to an executive level. So, all right, here we go. So for this, now I've got just from what I've created in SE ranking, because I had it really situated as slides, I can just pull it out and I'm ready to go, ready to share this to a client. It's a nice presentation. It's really easy to follow. I can talk through it. I got, all my visuals in here, my narratives. I can show search performance. I have a nice graph to show here or a chart for my rankings. I can visually show them our areas of challenges, and then I can get into the solutions. And so that is really, it's a good news example, but it's even how I go about working on the quarterly. So I know everyone's different, but that's how I do things. But to bring it all back together, when it comes to, and I'm going to go back to my presentation just to show you really the end. When it comes to all of this, how do we do it? Well, we're going to use a narrative. We're going to use our visuals wisely, and we're going to focus on that impact. And what I don't have on here, but what I've said over and over, is we need to also think about our audience. By doing that, you're going to have reporting that's going to help you keep those clients for the long term. So with that, I'd like to open it up if there's questions. I know I tend to talk a lot because I've been a professor for a really long time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a robust reporting process that you go through, but I love how you started with the psychology of who's reading this content and their stakeholder, their buy-in of these reports. And I'm going to take advantage of my role here and ask you a quick question before we go over to some of the questions that are asking. Because we do reporting a lot over on our side of the fence here. There's a good deal of charts that we can actually bring into a report here. But I do find sometimes that if we put too many charts in, based on the aptitude of the client, they can get a bit upset because they don't believe that they should be interpreting the charts, right? So a bit of a space where a little bit of dialogue along with what they're seeing in these charts has helped us immensely just be able to get across the point. So it's not only visualization, but also almost like a little chorus that's going along with the presentation. This is what this means. This is what this means.
Yes.
Have you found that as a valuable tactic?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the graphs, and I'll tell you a personal story, I have a complex in terms of, did I label, if I did a bar graph, did I label the axes? Because I got beat up by one client over and over and over again if I forgot to say sessions or something like that, where I'm like, well, isn't it obvious? Because the slide itself said sessions, but they're like, it doesn't say that on the chart. So yes. And a lot of times too, because my quarterly report is what I tend to put a lot, even more visuals too, is in terms of the outside graphics or bar charts and all that, is I usually will put a bullet point on there, even if I'm going to be talking through it, so that they know what it is. But you can't assume, and it doesn't mean that the client's not intelligent. It's just not their world.
Right. Exactly. Just asking them to be in that space. And we have the curse of knowledge, unfortunately, and we all can get there where we don't label that. And isn't it obvious what we're talking about here? And that can actually be. I always try to navigate data points, either positive or negative data points in just relationship with clients. Right. And these reports can, even though you're saying some positive things, the data points of the relationship can actually weigh against you unless you're really shepherding the communication along with that. So there's a lot of additional features that are customization in the SE ranking report. Yes. Where you can put that dialogue in there, right? Absolutely.
And so when I showed even the monthly report, there was the bar graph, and I didn't have necessarily the narrative underneath, but I just had, year over year sessions, all the things that put organic traffic, but absolutely. And so you can just put bullet points. And that's what's really great too with SE ranking, is that when you're adding things, it's really easy to add the text as well.
Absolutely. It's a great report with a lot of tie-ins here. Do you find yourself, well, let me ask you this, last one, I promise this last one.
Ask away.
Do you, how do you handle clients that actually hover over their own keywords, their own trophy words, and they're not realizing that they are being served up their SERPs by their location, by their logged in preferences, right? How do you help them get off that particular cliff? And because if they're in disbelief, well, I see it right here, I'm not ranking here, but you're ranking report shows us there. How do you actually help mitigate that issue?
Oh gosh, I think we all feel that pain because it happens all the time. Well, the CEO said when he looked it up, didn't see it. And so with that, I mean, it is a lot of education and it is a lot of repeating of this is how it works. This is how what you're seeing in the report is based on the true, position within the index. What you're looking at is all these figures or outside factors that are putting into your personalization. So for me, it is just a lot of education. But I'll give you an example to take it a step further. I had one client that was convinced for a while that voice search was killing them and that they weren't even showing up and all of this. Like it got so much to the point, this was a few years ago, that I actually had to do on Alexa at home, like show them, like I recorded it and I sent it. I'm like, no, you do. Like if someone's asking for directions or, the address of your location, it is there, but they just didn't believe me and I'd sent that. And I actually never heard anything after that. I never heard of it. Even a thank you. It's just like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you have to do that. You have to go out of the box of the report, do screenshots and what have you. But it's that shepherding of the expectations, but also knowing what really matters to the client, because everything else, all the data, clients can actually get a pushback because they're in data overload.
Exactly.
And that's a tough thing because they can perceive an SEO company kind of hiding behind that data because they have to interpret so much. So it's a good space to be able to shepherd that client all the way.
Right. Right. And it's what you said, it's relationships. So listening to them, that's what they care about. Make sure you are coherent of that and you're educating them.
Absolutely. I'm going to pivot over to the audience. I have a couple questions for you. Seb Kaltenhaus says, hey, Mindy, what's the one thing that you never leave out of a report, no matter what?
Because we're doing SEO, even if the client doesn't care about organic traffic, I always put that in. I never take it out because I can still, in my narrative, explain how that does tie to their KPIs. There's the obvious ones, obviously, that's very deep. But there's the obvious ones where, okay, more traffic means potential revenue. And so that one I never leave out to answer that question.
Okay. Well, absolutely. That's obvious, right?
Yeah.
Had to do it. Paulina says, thank you very much, Mindy. Which departments do you collaborate with to collect your impact and ROI data? How do you structure these conversations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so for my business and what we do, we are usually with the marketing, not usually, we're always with the marketing department. I mean, that's who we're working with now at different levels within the marketing department. But what I ask for to be able to get that ROI data, if it's not already in Google Analytics where it's set up, if they're e-commerce, it's easy enough. We can see revenue. But if it's like the quarterly example, we had to look at their particular CRM and they gave us access to their CRM to be able to look at certain reports. And so that's where we get the data. And so, but I'll tell you, not every client will do that. And so we do have to rely on them to give us the information. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But most of them, the more they trust you, they're going to give you that because they want to succeed and they want to be able to measure things too.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing is to be able to have that attribution model all the way through that transaction. So not only the initial revenue from efforts, but also the return revenue that it kind of embodies the life cycle of that customer with them, because it's not just the first person. It's the entire life cycle.
Right. It's the customer lifetime value user that comes in.
Another question from Homer. He says, how do you tailor reports for clients who are very detailed oriented versus who just wants the overview?
Right. So, and I have clients in both camps. And so what I do, I mean, that I need to know who's getting the report, who's this report going to? And so, and then I'm just going to be totally transparent with everything. Sometimes it's through trial and error because I'll send one report and they're like, I need more. And then, their monthly report is going to be pretty big and robust, by the end of it. And so, but I like to know who it's going to, because if it's going to more than one person and one person wants the overview and one person wants the detail oriented side of things, that's when that narrative that I showed you really comes into play, because you can put that narrative and that's for the person who just wants the overview. Like, give me the short version. But then you have all of those details and the pages if someone wants to dig into the data. And then from there, like in SEO ranking, how I was showing you, you can put a summary for each section. So that's really for that person who wants to be detail oriented.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's almost like you're echolocating the reporting consumer who's going to be receiving that. Have you ever thought about actually putting through all the reports like a disc model of different character types and have like 4 different versions that choose your own adventure?
Right. Seriously. Yeah.
All right. Well, Mindy, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate the insight and reportings, and I highly appreciate the insight from a psychology level, because sometimes reportings are an afterthought, and they really should be the kind of the first stage, even as you land the engagement, how you're going to discuss this all the way through.
Right.
We got all the panelists here, and I wanted to open up the forum for some quick Q&A here, and we'll kind of navigate this as we appreciate our audience sticking around for the entire piece here. One thing I'm just going to kind of set the stage here as a question, as I've heard it from all the different panelists here. Something that really dawned on me, folks, is that you all represent part of the ecosystem of the marketing campaign, and you all have your own individual agencies. But strategically, we had proposal, the keyword analysis and work and project build out, as well as the reports, right? So something that actually comes through all of this is the commitment of what your goals are and following through the goals all the way to the reporting process, and continue to affirm with the client, this is what we started out with, this is how we're navigating it, and this is what we're reporting. So can you, in your experience, give me some examples of possible challenges in the model that you create? Because you present this model, everything's thought through, and everything's fantastic except for the client. That client can actually get a little bit squirrely on us. So, Ben, I'm going to go to you first before anything else. Keywords are always being challenged by the clients. How do you keep that thread going all the way through?
The first thing I try to do is to break down this silly idea that keywords are not things you put into websites to make SEO happen. That's just fundamentally not how that works.
They're not coins in the slot. Okay,
they're not coins in the slot. They're not tags you put into some metadata somewhere and suddenly magic SEO. No, it's about understanding of the audience. It's a replacement for focus groups, or it's a replacement for going out and meeting with your audience. It is understanding the language that they speak. And the hardest point I have to get across, and this happens regularly, is your website is not for you, it's for them.
Oh.
The whole point of this is to speak in their terms. And the only way I can do that without coming to verbal blows or diplomatic solutions is to just present the facts and to just say, look, we will use numerous tools. We will use Google Search Console. We will use SE ranking. We will use any tool you want us to do, but we will show you why your audience is searching for these things. And then we'll help you to understand the context of it. We'll help you to understand the reasoning by it. There might be some etymology to the way that the language has changed in UK or US or different sort of audiences. Say, well, look, there is a reason why they don't speak the language you think they do, and it's because you're detached from them. But that's why we're here. We're here to represent them. And through this process, our goal is to just, as Mindy greatly says, just educate. It's just to educate the client. And sometimes you have to let them make that realization for themselves by presenting them with the data, explaining what you think happens and how this thing transpires, and then let them just take that on board. Often they don't agree in the meeting, and there will be grumbles, and there will be, okay, and there won't be any sort of clarification. And then a short while later, they'll come back and say, I've been having a look through this data, and I think this might be the case. Yes, great, good insights. Not at all prompted, but I'm glad you came up with the idea, however it was incepted.
Excellent, sir. I appreciate the analogy. We're kind of translating their audience to them because they don't have the tools. Connor, you kind of represent the while we're still friends conversation whenever you begin a new engagement with a client. So how do you consistently keep the thread of what we set up as goals, we continued in the process, and we reported on those goals? How do you keep that client in line?
in part, we try to record everything. Expansive client briefs and, recording these calls, listing out their KPIs. And we demonstrate this sort of common understanding throughout multiple calls leading up to the start of the campaign. So, from these initial discovery calls before they're even a client onto the actual discovery call where we learn more information about their business, recap certain things that were discussed during these initial sales conversations that, are important to them that they're going to keep an eye on to demonstrate, was this a smart investment? Are you the right people to handle my marketing? And then through to, again, reiterating these on the kickoff calls. And then in terms of the reporting, we do monthly reporting with our clients. We have a dashboard that I mentioned where they're able to log in and see all of these things. And that's where it gets interesting with every client because, everyone, has certain things that they care about, like you mentioned. And so that's like one of the harder things when you're trying to create a scalable process to deliver, consistent productivity to every client. The reporting is where it gets tricky and it's on kind of like a per individual basis. What do they care about? What do they want to see? How involved are they in terms of even, like one thing that we like to do is go through the leads that came in this week or this month and qualify. Was this good? What was the value behind it? Did they convert? So that we can say, this is money that's coming in through your investment. It's not everyone likes to do that. So, you'll get that phone call 9 months down the road, like, we've gotten nothing. You're like, well, let's take a look.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mindy, to you, you're also part of the entire ecosystem from start to finish here. Any other additional insights from how do we keep that constant, consistent, not only strategy, but reporting, but also making sure that client's not bucking out of the stall, wanting to be able to run across the field and go cherry pick an ebook and tell us that that's the way to go.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to I'll answer that and to add to it, because I'm sure no one's ever experienced this where your client's the roadblock. They know what they need to do, but they don't do it.
Right.
Because that might happen a few times. So yeah, obviously the educating all this stuff helps with like if they're reading something and we need to try this, bringing them back to this is what our strategy is. And so if you noticed in my quarterly report, because that was it was hypothetical, but not, because it was actually something we went through with the client of the challenges. And so we actually had to show them, because the question we would get is, why is this competitor doing better than us? Why do they keep outranking us? Why, you get those a lot. And so we actually dug in and showed them your competitor has this amount of pages. This is how often they're creating new content. You're not creating any content, despite the fact that we've been giving you these blueprints and telling you. And so that's a challenge. And that's where my little red, that's where that came from with the red. We're on red because of this. And so I didn't show it here, but I actually had followed up after that quarterly report with here's what they have, here's what you have, and just putting it side by side. And so that's helped, because you talk about your goals and KPIs in the very beginning, the proposal stage, and then you work through, your keywords and all of those things, strategy, but then the reporting is where they're going to start asking all the questions. And so
and they're always wanting to be able to see a quick turnaround. And sometimes you're trying to steer a barge as opposed to a speedboat here. So you got to be able to give that context. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the audience here. One quick question from Josephine Allard. Got any tips for quickly spotting high impact, low effort SEO opportunities using SE ranking? Oh, it's a jump ball. I can see that. If you all say it depends at the same time, we're going to unplug it right now.
3, 2.
Ben, what do you think about some low effort, high yield SEO opportunities?
Definitely go back to that sort of competitor analysis or Google Search Console. Look into your own website. Where are you nearly there for? Mm-hmm. There are so many instances where clients are kind of their SERP is 12.
Right.
You don't need to go very far to suddenly start seeing traffic. Even for high volume search traffic, the moment you're outside of 10 or even sometimes outside of 5 or 6, it drops off a cliff. Yeah, so genuinely look for search keywords that have search volume that's reasonable, respectable, but you're just outside of the top 10. And the closer you are to the top 10, but outside of it, the quicker you're going to get that turnaround. There are exceptions. The top 10 might be entirely impossible to compete with, but that's unusual. It's more often the case that if you're at position 12, you could probably be position 7 or 8. And
Not with a terrible effort. I mean, that literally is.
It really is. You're kind of really close to being there.
Yep.
And it might even be that you just need to rewrite a page.
There you
For
go.
the sake of rewriting a page, you get instant real world return.
To add to that, one of the tactics we've been employing to great success is you look at those pages that are maybe on page 2, they're already indexed and ranking for the terms that you want to rank for. It has great search volume. One of the ways that we approach those is we'll see which ones have SERP features, like featured snippet features. Look at the featured snippet that's actually ranking for it, reverse engineer the exact thing they're doing. So is the featured snippet a part of a table of contents at the bottom of the page? Is it the opening, sentence to introduce the article? What sort of like metadata is behind it? Is it followed by like an H3 title tag and an H2 in the FAQs or whatever? And I know, Ben, you mentioned you don't use AI, but drop that thing in some chat GPT.
I use it for a lot of things. I just don't use that particular AI tool.
Working some synonyms, some common phraseology, and that's actually been working pretty well for us in terms of you'd be surprised you go from like a position of 12 right up into that future snippet spot in a matter of weeks.
Absolutely, Mindy. Some low effort, high yield results there.
Yeah. And so the first thing that popped in my head was what Ben said, because we always go to Google Search Console. That's half the battle. I mean, if Google recognizes your page, you're like, okay, now we just need to work on it. So I'll add something different to the mix, because it's one of the other things we do is like within SEO ranking, and this comes back to keywords. When we're looking at keywords, we don't necessarily discount the ones that are low search volume, because if we notice that there's low search volume, but people are paying for that in the paid search, to me, that's an aha moment. That's an ROI. And especially then if it's low difficulty as well, like we're going to go after it. Now, what we'll do from there is we're going to look at that. What is the search intent? If it's informational, then we're not going to be pushing a product page or a service page. We're going to create a robust piece of informational content on their blog. And so that's what we'll look at. And that's been really great too, because you're still to have challenges, but it's a bit easier. And then you can show, going back to what I was talking about with parting, like there is ROI, like we're going to get some sales from this.
One of the things I found is if you actually take all of the PAAs in a particular industry or a particular search intent, and you show your client all of the answers that are on the PAAs and kind of a lineup going, hey, do you think you could answer these a little bit better? My God, they get furious, because all of a sudden they know that, yes, we are a specialty at this, and this, and that's an idiotic answer. And all of a sudden you got buy-in galore. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, then help us write these 20 new pages that can go after the PAAs and the rich snippets. So you got to give them a little bit of FOMO in the space, right? All right, so we got a question here. Let's see here. I have a question about how do you really dig into a competitor's strategy without getting overwhelmed by the data? I'll toss it to Connor.
I don't know, man.
That's the honest answer.
You get started on it, and you'll find 5 hours have passed, and you're like, I should have been doing something.
That is the rabbit hole of all rabbit holes, right?
I don't know if I'm going to have a good answer for you, because that's literally what happens all the time. I would say use your filters in your tools, especially if you're teasing out keywords that you're focusing on. Go for the low competition. Look for low competition. Look for those with good search volume. Like Mindy said, if you're pushing any sort of like commercial or transactional web page, look for those keywords with low difficulty. Even if they don't have high search volume, if they're being bid on, it's a good indicator that people are searching that to actually make a purchase. So, if you can focus on that and not get carried away, like I'm sure most of us do, you could save some time. But yeah,
we all understand. We know it. We've been in our dark holes and looking at hours and hours of data.
And then all of a sudden you get that like, oh my God, I forgot about this part, and then you're back in it.
Yeah. Oh, there's another competitor. Mindy, help us out here. How do we contain this and not getting lost in the data?
I know. I was laughing because I was just thinking about our competitor reports, and we actually just finished a huge one that took forever because you do get like pretty far down into it. And the client came back and like, "Oh, can you do these 2 more?" Like, oh gosh, they're like, sure. But I will add, pivot tables are very nice. That always helps when you're trying to analyze a little bit in a cleaner fashion. But I'm going to actually just take the client, like, again, because I'm going to focus on reporting here. Don't send the client just the massive spreadsheets. Just don't. Okay. And you're like, well, yeah, duh. Okay. Well, I may or may not have done that before, but they just look at it and they're like, I don't even know what to do from this. So you're going to go down on the weeds. I don't think there's any way around it. It does take a while. But I like the idea of using filters. I mean, that's a huge thing. Use pivot tables, use the tools available to you. But when you're actually sending it to the client, just give them just a handful of, here's the findings, here's what we're going to do because of it. And just leave it at that.
Give them the action items that tie directly to those findings.
Yeah.
And I'll add in there is that if a client comes to you going, hey, let's have a look at this competitor, you got to be able to say, well, that's not really your competitor because of this, and this. Yeah, they may be bubbling up to the surface, but you know what? Some of your competitors are not who you think they are because of the intent of the query. You're up against some Wikidata. You're up against a number of other spaces in which it's not that brick and mortar competitor. It's they're meeting the answer, meeting the query, and also giving additional information to be able to build that user journey deeper into their website. So your competitors really the ones that are answering the questions, not the ones that are lined up in the on the balance sheet as a true competitor. Anyway, that said, any final thoughts for our audience before we let you all go? We do appreciate your time today. Ben, final thoughts.
I mean, I was just going to add one last little bit to that, which is we're all in the service industry. We've all got deadlines. We've all got time frames. We've all got a limited amount of time. If I'm given a task where I know it's X amount of research and I've got X amount of hours, I'll break it down into the core components, give myself a timeline, and it's just like running a race. It's like you got to pace yourself. You know, if you have an hour to do competitive research, that's not a lot of time. If you have a day, you can go a bit more detailed. And so depending on that will depend on whether I kind of go light, quick touches and quick snap decisions where you just have to make a decision there and then, make some choices and move on, go to the next thing. It's okay if you're doing it the first time around because SEO isn't once and done, because it's ongoing. If you just make decisions and just start doing things based on the data that you have and the time that you have available, you'll get more stuff the next time you do this. And so for me, it's just don't overthink it. Don't overworry. Don't worry if you've missed something out. You will catch it next time. And it's much better that we work within the time constraints we have and we don't spend all of our time researching one particular thing and leaving nothing left for other important tasks like writing the content. Yeah, which has happened.
Connor, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, going back to the whole competitive research thing, it's going to be ongoing throughout the entire campaign. You'll use it to create that roadmap and the framework for the campaign based on who you've identified and how you analyze their strategies. Once you map out the content you need to create, identify the pages that you need to optimize, you're going to go back and do more research just to, realign your brain, and you're going to learn new things. So like that said, don't, give yourself some barriers. Don't overdo it. You're going to keep doing the competitive research, every time you're doing one of the deliverables. So.
And let alone as things change in the SERP, right?
Yeah, I mean,
these more choppy waters.
Natural, so.
Absolutely. Mindy, I'll give you the final thought for the webinar today.
Yeah, and this is a lot broader, but I've been in this industry a long time, and so there's really two things that I want to say. So no matter how experienced you are, how many years you have under your belt, always keep learning because things change. I'm always trying to learn and never going to be at the point where I feel like, oh, I know everything. And so attending, webinars like this is important. And then also, I think the other thing, what's so amazing, I feel like about our search marketing industry is that it is a community. So, reach out to people, reach out to us, whether it's on LinkedIn or on X, whatever it might be, but there's a really good support system too. So you're not in it alone, any of it. You've got people who understand you.
Absolutely.
Except for the client.
Except for the client. They're not part of it. We're not including them.
It is great whenever you do come across a client that really gets it. Mm-hmm. Oh, because then you're in a whole nother stratosphere. Say, oh, yeah, play in the playground over here. This is really cool.
There's a very good reason that my clients are now the people who do the SEO. I teach and train because I just avoid that entire part of the puzzle. It's just like, I'm just going to work with people doing the SEO. There you go.
There you go. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We truly do appreciate it. We also want to make sure that you follow SE Ranking on all the different channels, but go over to the YouTube channel as well. This is where this is housed, but they're regularly posting materials to be able to help you advance your SEO and SE ranking journey. Again, from SE ranking, thank you so much for everybody, all the panelists here. And I certainly do appreciate the honor to be able to moderate this webinar. So thank you so much, SE ranking. With that, I think we're wrapped. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Ross.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.